Shadowbane is a online massively multi-user game set in a dark fantasy world.
My ideal vision of Shadowbane in terms of theme would be a mix of the Arthurian legends meets the Lord of the Rings meets the Road Warrior.
We've got 10 or so different environments. Barren Nordic wastes, all the way down into dungeons and caverns.
Our world is dark and grim and full of people who hate each other.
We're going to have several hundred creatures in the game. They'll range from, average run-of-the-mill animals all the way up to fantastical, undead, skeletons and zombies and dragons and everything on the large scale.
It's kind of a hybrid game between a large-scale strategy simulator and a role-playing game.
One thing that we had learned through our years of working on online text games was that the sense of community is one of the most key elements that you can have in a game like this.
Players will actually start to form political alliances, start to create their own nations.
What I want people to be surprised by are the consequences for their actions.
The most exciting enemy you can have in a game is another player.
You'll see things like betrayal and revenge.
Going out and killing anyone you meet should always be a viable option.
It makes the reality real when the thing that you're up against is some other thinking person at another console somewhere.
The story will change as the players get involved in it.
We have to make a much more general purpose engine, I guess, that can handle things changing all the time.
The world is actually changing based on their actions, and that has ripple effects that can affect thousands or even hundreds of thousands of other players.
We focused on the concept of guilds, players coming together in groups, and that community would build the same way it did in the Mud, where you'd have a couple hundred people that knew each other, got online, chatted with each other, and then could ultimately go out and try to take over other small communities.
I would love to see a situation where a race dies out. You can be the last of the elves or the last of whoever.
We have to consider everything that people will do.
So the game is running 24/7 all the time. If I take off on vacation and I come back a week later, the game may be significantly different than when I left. We've also added a number of social behaviors that basically allow people to interact. Chat channels so that I can constantly talk to people, even people that are across the world. We just kind of break the bounds of reality to allow people to really foster communications. Initially, you are given a period where you are able to basically learn the ropes. You can walk around and gain a little bit in power, things like that, and really get a feeling for things. After that initial period is over, then you're allowed to jump into the main part of the world, the continent itself. You can choose a profession like I'm going to be a warrior or I'm going to be a wizard. You can then also choose any number of disciplines, like I also want to know about archery or I want to be a master of using blades. Allowing them to customize not just their appearance but also their career path is incredibly important.
I'm envisioning a system where every month or every 2 months one race is going to get looked at again. And whereas now they have maybe 2 or 3 different standard clothing types, we'll give them 3 more or 6 more. And that way, over the course of a year of play, the world becomes a much more diverse place.
Well, the process usually starts by, I get a submission from the design department. If they're designing a new area or a new environment.
Rather than actually having artists sit down and create every hill and every tree and every piece of grass by hand, instead we built a world generator.
It randomly distributes trees and plants and vegetation and rocks throughout the world, gives us our hills and our valleys and whatnot.
The world designers can literally sit down and say in a couple words, I want this to be a more hilly world, I want the sea level to be high or low, I want it to be ice or desert, etc., etc.
We're ending up with environments that are going to look very different. And you're going to be able to look at something and go, oh, an elf built that, versus, oh, a dwarf must have built this.
I'm kind of a virtual set designer. In a way, I take all of the assets that the artists create and I arrange them into sort of dioramas that are, I guess, the adventure zones where characters can enter them and fight monsters and see various props and buildings. And
they bring the verbal descriptions of the creatures and I go to the drawing board from there. I have hundreds and hundreds of books that I use for reference. I keep a pretty decent reference library. My theory has always been that If you ground something in reality, it's more familiar to people, and then you can take it from there and leave reality with it.
The suspension of disbelief becomes very easy when the place looks natural.
Use various applications like Lightwave 3D or 3D Studio Max to create the model. After that's done, I go through the process of actually coloring the model and putting textures on it. This is done in Photoshop and various other paint packages. And then those textures that I paint are taken back to Max and applied to the model, which gives us the finished result of what you see in the game. This is what I got approved for the gargoyle sketch. Here we can see a wireframe of the gargoyle posed. He's a bipedal creature. He walks sort of up on his toes like a lot of animals do. He also has wings, which sort of increased his complexity. Here you'll see sort of the profile of the head mesh superimposed on top of the final texture map that was used to paint it. Here all of the wireframe images are, I superimpose them on top of the two-dimensional images. Here you can see the wireframe which we saw for the head. There's also the body, the wings, every other part of it. This is in turn taken back to 3D Studio Max and applied to the model, which we can see right here in its finished state. The same model, same pose. I can turn on edge faces so you can see a correspondence to where the wireframe is compared to the textures. He's busy running around now terrorizing an old abandoned church ruin in the northern wastes covered in snow. Some of the creatures that are bipedal, it's a natural step to actually mocap them. We did the lizard man, in fact, who are largely bipedal, humanoid shape with roughly the same proportions. We had Trey, who was the artist who actually did the lizard man, get inside the suit since he's the smallest of us and most tolerant. And he mocapped the movement for his own creature that he created, which is sort of a unique opportunity for him. So it's really funny, largely whenever we're looking at the lizard man moving around in the game, the motion seems really natural and cool, but all of us just see Trey moving around, acting like an idiot. More recently than this, I did a skeletal drake, which you've seen the concept up on my wall for. He hasn't been taken to the final stages of texturing, but the model is in its complete state. I wanted something menacing and something that looked like it would scare the heck out of you in the dark. Also, since he's undead, I broke some of his teeth and broke a horn. I'm also going to knock some holes in these ribs, which will help lower the polygon count as well. Polys is a short term for polygons, which in game terms is a collection of vertices that define a surface in space. The number of polygons that an object consists of, the number of triangles it takes to actually build the three-dimensional makeup of the model has a large bearing on the performance speed of the CPU. The more polys that you have on screen, the greater amount of CPU cycles it takes to render an image on screen.
A software package like this rivals probably any other scientific or large-scale, transactional database in the world.
Certainly each world is going to be running on a single machine, and so except for that Sunbox, which is extremely large, Shadowbane can run on very small machines. And in fact, the Origin 300 there, the SGI machine, is one of the best performers and is physically the smallest.
We want to have a system where monthly or bi-monthly or whatever, we are just introducing new stuff anyway.
And if we add new content to the game, then when you patch, you'll get that new stuff. And
so now, hey, yeah, the vendors over here are selling new stuff that they weren't selling last week. Or there's a new town which is selling stuff that you haven't seen before.
We don't want people to notice what's going on underneath. We want them to have a big seamless experience.
Eventually, when the game is released, I'm going to be pretty much in charge of making sure that there is some kind of online story happening that the players are participating in and that is getting continually updated so that there's more to do than just run around and kill each other. Although, I would love to have the power to smash an entire game world. I've read debates and articles about that sort of thing where people are like, that's just ludicrous, that's crazy talk. if you do that, your players will stone you. And I'm like, maybe they won't, if it's a good story. If, you know, if we crush a world, but we bring another world online, or we brought another world online last month, so that the number of worlds is the same. And if you still have the means in this new world of building yourself back to where you were before, then why not throw a little adversity into the mix?
This is going to be an amazing experience. This is going to be something really cool.
We have hundreds of large-scale guilds, armies, and nations that are already formed in anticipation of this game.
When you see it, your eyes are going to bug out. You know, you're going to go, wow.
Next time you're online, check out Substance.tv. Now, I know you'll forget that as soon as I quit talking, so look at the DVD jacket and burn that URL into your subconscious somewhere. Substance.tv.